Hey guys, wow, I know it's been a really long time. Has it been that long? It's been a week, I think, since we last saw each other. I know I was supposed to come on Wednesday, and I just have not been able to make it until now. In fact, now is even not such a great time. My dog's been quite sick. I've taken him for walks where he's drank kind of, I don't know if it's sewage water, but he certainly got ill from drinking some water, and he's just sort of come out of it now. He was really farting a lot, and his nose was dry, and he was not himself. Come on, come up, come boy, come. He was not himself, and fortunately, he's regained his strength, like Van Gogh. He's regained his strength. I've been a bit of a bad master. I've not uh, walked with him that much. I didn't walk with him today or yesterday, so he's a little upset about that. You sort of can tell he tries to get you to go for a walk, and then when he can tell that it's not going to happen, he sort of goes and lies in the corner in a way, like in a bit of a grumpy mood. But okay, Timmy, come, let's go. So the picture you see on screen, first of all, just hi guys, good to see you. Snowline, I hope you're doing okay. Chelsea, good to see you. Grey Cat, I see you said October 19. October 19, was that how far I got? I'm sure I'm further than that, but if you say so. Um, I'm not sure if it's Giardia. I'm not sure, but I did ultimately give him probiotics, and then he, I don't know, his digestive system seemed to go into overdrive, like from like whatever it was to making perfect stools, like long. Do I really need to explain? But anyway, the point is, he's okay now. Um, but yeah, I'm going to have to try and get him not to drink water that's lying out there, which is in a way unfortunate. Bridget, good to see you. Hi, Stephanie, good to see you. I hope your dog Ralph is doing okay. Silent Murmur says, is there some way a little corner tray can be prepared with soil for him? There's quite a lot of soil for him, but believe it or not, he doesn't need a tray. He's got quite a lot in the backyard. So anyway, I'm going to take you through a couple of more images from the walk that we did. If you look at the image on screen, that dam, I'm not quite sure why it's not empty, um, because normally it was leaking. So for some reason it had water in it. But that was late afternoon. Look at that beautiful sunshine, late afternoon sunshine. That's the kind of, I mean, can you see I even captured those rays coming through there? That's the kind of sun that I think Van Gogh loved, except this is kind of winter in South Africa, so it's not a particularly warm sun, but look how bright the blue is. The blue there and the yellow there, right? It's quite bright. So let's have a look at another picture. This was also taken very late in the day, and it's almost kind of a gold color. I was actually standing in front of this fence post. Otherwise, you see a kind of an odd shadow. So I was trying to use the shadow of the fence post, but that is my shadow over it. But once again, you can see this beautiful golden light turning the rocks golden. And look how far you can see from this relatively low point. Okay. I'm just going to take you through a few photos and then we can continue with the episode. So that's just some forced perspective. Some people like that, some people probably don't. This is the same dam just a little bit late in the day with the sun virtually setting. You can see I was really trying to get that sort of golden light. And then this is just capturing some of the Team Peachtree colors. I don't know if that's particularly artistic. This is another view of that scene. You can see Timmy over there. This isn't where Timmy drank whatever water. There's nothing wrong with this water. It comes down from the hillside, so it's rainwater. The only possibility here is that cattle trample around and sometimes they defecate a little bit higher up, and so there's a chance that the water might not be that great. But it's actually another place I take him to where it's literally some sewage water comes in there, and sometimes it sits. It sort of it doesn't. It's not flowing water, and so that is what is kind of the problem. Okay, and I think I've got two photos left. Oh, well, that's the same one. Yeah, so it's basically just that one again. I quite like that picture, which is why I've chosen it as the background. So I believe we are dealing with letter 19. Is that right? Oh, I think letter 19 was the last letter we did, wasn't it? Is this a letter from Theo to Vincent? Yeah. So you may remember in the last letters, Vincent was saying how full of compliments Gauguin was, and he was, this is shortly after the exchange of self-portraits. Vincent painted his self-portrait, sent it to Gauguin and Emile Bernard. Gauguin and Emile Bernard both did self-portraits of themselves, but also kind of in the background, the other person. And so there was like a three-way exchange of self-portraits and a little bit of buttering up from Gauguin, giving Vincent a lot of compliments and so on. And we've also sort of reached a point now where Vincent is starting to struggle. He's starting to run out of energy, is struggling with money, and things are coming to a head. Okay, so let's continue with this letter. I do want to talk about some other things, but I think we need to kind of get going. It's midnight here in South Africa, so I need to kind of make hay while the moon shines. Stephanie says, Ralph is very friendly with a sweet mini schnauzer named Wally. Okay, well, I'll keep an eye on him, I'll bear that in mind. Thanks a lot. I wonder if Timmy and Wally will ever meet. I guess Wally's a dude, right? Deborah says this area looks very similar to the Australian bush. Yeah, some parts of the South African landscape feel like Australia and vice versa. Okay, so let's get going. Before the 10-minute mark. From Vincent to Theo, Arles, 21st of October, 1888. My dear Theo, thank you for your letter and the 50-franc note it contained. Thank you for writing more about the picture by these Dutch artists. You may remember they were talking about that big frame, and I think they were referring to De Haan and Isaacson. Okay. He goes on to say, I've had gas put in the studio and in the kitchen, which cost me 25 francs for the installation. If Gauguin and I worked every night for a fortnight, shouldn't we get it back? Only as Gauguin may come any day now, I absolutely need at least 50 francs. So can you see what is going on now is he is getting very flustered, kind of on behalf of his guest. Now, if you think about the psychology of, I'm going to put the best room aside for him, right? It's the same psychology of, oh shit, I need all this money for him. And so he's getting himself very stressed out on behalf of his honored guest who's going to treat him like crap anyway. So anyway, he says here, I absolutely need at least 50 francs. Now, if you think about that, when has he ever said that to his brother? Like ever? When has he ever said to Theo, you must send me money right now. It's absolutely urgent. So can you see he's getting really worked up on behalf of Theo, and he's not asking for things like art supplies or for rent money. He's asking for basically whatever is going to be taking care of his guest, and this is what is getting him stressed, right? What does Alina say? Yeah, that is not good to hear. Definitely not good to hear. Dogs get gastrointestinal infections. Yeah. Okay. I must say, schnauzers have got particularly sensitive stomachs. Okay, let's continue. So he says, I'm not ill, but without the slightest doubt, I'd get that way if I do not eat really well and if I don't stop painting for a few days. So once again, on October 21st, we get this self-diagnosis from him. He's not ill, but is very close to it. He's basically starving and he needs money for gas installation. What was the other thing? What did he say here? I'm not sure what the other thing is, but he spent 25 francs on installation. And he says, I'm again pretty nearly reduced to the madness of Hugo van der Goes in Emile Waters' painting, Emile Waters' painting. So I can imagine art experts, art historians jumping all over this paragraph where they say, I can imagine myself nearly reduced to madness, and taking that literally and saying, you see, he is going mad. You see, he knows he's going mad. But do you think he means that he's literally going mad? Or do you think he's just saying, jeepers, it's so stressful that I'm going crazy? What do you think he's sort of getting at there? And so when he talks about the sketch, the madness of Hugo van der Goes in Emile Waters' painting, I think he's talking about this picture. He's talking about this picture. Not quite sure where there's madness there. It's certainly not a happy picture, but anyway, that is how he sees himself, quite desperate and in a maybe kind of in a dark corner to some extent. Anyway, that is Emile Waters' madness, referring to Hugo van der Goes. Anyway, it says, and if it were not that I have almost a double nature, like that of a monk and that of a painter, I should have, and that long ago, been reduced completely and utterly to the aforesaid condition. So here he's actually talking about madness. Can you believe it? On the 21st of October, he's talking about, and there he mentions it again, madness, right? He talks about mania. He talks about having a state of excitement. He talks about the contemplation of eternity and eternal life. He talks about, I must be aware of my nerves, right? But do you see what he's saying here is, right? I need to pay for the gas. And this whole business with Gauguin coming here is driving me nuts, right? And as I said, you can imagine an art historian sort of jumping on that and saying, you see, he is struggling with insanity. But isn't he actually just saying, this is driving me crazy? You know, when is Gauguin coming? And think about the crazy situation he is in. He is hosting someone and he doesn't have any money. He's a painter with no money, and he's got to sort of um, sort out the accommodation of someone, but he doesn't have any money, and so he's got to ask someone else for the money. But then he gets sort of caught up in the thing of, we need to get that, but then he's got to ask his brother for it, and then his brother's got to send him money. Then he gets that. Then he realizes, wow, we really have to have that. And bear in mind, he doesn't have any of these things because he's living himself like a pauper. And that's really the original problem. It's not like he lives a sort of a functional life in a sense of 3 square meals a day, a nice bedroom. He's kind of kitting this whole place out on behalf of Gauguin, right? And that is why I say he's actually quite a resilient guy. He's used to poverty, he's used to struggle, he's used to some extent, starvation. He's used to going without, right? He's used to it. And all of this stress is actually on behalf of Gauguin, is trying to basically create an environment that a spoiled brat would be happy with, right? A high maintenance spoiled brat. But what I'm trying to say is this really Van Gogh showing that he's a mad person? Or would anyone in the same situation, you don't have money, you've been living in a tent, and now you've got to host, the prime minister? Isn't that going to make anyone stressed, right? And not only that, the president keeps telling you, you know what, I'm not sure if I'm going to come, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. Can you see it's a recipe for maddening, maddening levels of stress, right? Yeah, he is living hand to mouth. So I'm just saying, if he was a normal dude with a normal home and a wife, maybe even, and Gauguin was coming around, wouldn't be a big deal. But it's a huge deal because he doesn't have any of those things. In a real sense, I mean, do you agree with me when I say this? In a real sense, his own personal standard of living is shooting up as a result of him hosting Gauguin. Do you agree with that? In other words, pre-Gauguin, Vincent's life was, you know, not just cups of coffee, but pretty much art all the time, and workaholic, not eating that much, maybe not even bathing very much. And now he is literally almost raising himself up from, let's say, lower class to middle class to some extent, right? Hi, Terry. Good to see you here. Yeah, thanks a lot for the congratulations. I actually thought I needed to do the second video I did today to help get there, and then the next thing I was there. And if I'd known, I probably would have delayed that video. But thanks a lot for that. So actually, quite incredible. It took me about, if you take away the 2 months I was in America, where I actually lost subscribers, believe it or not. If you take those 2 months away, it took about 4 months, 4 to 5 months to get to 50,000 subscribers, just one in like half a year. It's quite incredible. Look at this channel, Team Peachtree, 1,000 subscribers. Quite weird. Anyway, let's go back to the letter. Thanks, Terry. He says, it's quite an interesting self-assessment. He says, I have almost a double nature, like that of a monk and that of a painter. What do you think he means by that? What is he getting at when he says, I have the nature of a monk, but also a painter, right? How does that work? So the way I think about a monk is someone who lives extremely frugally, someone who is alone a lot, who doesn't speak to a lot of people, who goes without, if I can put it that way, who's self um, deprecating, I guess, but also disciplined. In terms of a painter, well, it's kind of like a monk that paints, and that is exactly what he's going to be in a couple of weeks when he goes to the asylum. He's literally going to be. It's going to look like a monk painting. Timmy's obviously still got some stomach issues. He's been farting a lot, so that wasn't fun. He, thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. Silent Murmur says, I'm in somewhere, but in the process of relocating. PNW. PNW. Something Wales. Very, internalized, but very expressive. That's quite a good way of putting it. Hi, Stephanie. It's always good to have both Stephanies in the house, and we had Terry in the house. The only person we're really missing, well, actually, we're missing a couple. We're missing Iceland, and we're missing, we're missing a couple of people. Pacific Northwest. Okay, got it. Just a second. Okay. Okay, so let's continue. So it's this question of how can you be a monk and a painter, and how is a painter different to a monk? Well, if you think about it, a painter is, I think the way he's thinking about it, quite an extravagant thinker and quite an extravagant and indulgent person with certain other appetites. I don't know whether you can say monks don't drink, because some like in the whole thing of Robin Hood, the Friar Tuck kind of makes the beer out of honey. What do they call it? Mead. So there is almost a cliche of the alcoholic priest or the alcoholic monk or whatever. But Van Gogh is also someone who likes going to brothels, which I don't know if monks do. Certainly they didn't, I think, in the time that he was living in. So I think that's kind of what he's getting at, that monks have sort of a modesty about them, a quiet modesty, and painters are quite expressive, as Bridget said. Yeah, monks, well, they're supposed to be celibate, aren't they? And so he's saying he's kind of two people at once, but I think it's really important him acknowledging, it's kind of what we've been saying all along, is that there's an aspect to him that is kind of like a pilgrim, and he likes this idea of quiet struggle, of being modest in his how can I put it, modest in his approach to others, to society, but larger than life in terms of his inner world, if that makes sense. And in a way, monks maybe have that same thing. They're modest, but they have a very larger than life idea of heaven and God's will, and how everything is, the spirit is moving this person and that person. Anyway, so he says, yet even then, I do not think that my madness would take the form of persecution mania, since when in a state of excitement, my feelings lead me rather to the contemplation of eternity and eternal life. So he says here, when in a state of excitement, in other words, it's almost like saying that when what one person would say is madness, he thinks about as a state of excitement. And think about the various states of excitement. You can have sexual uh, what's the word, ecstasy, which can be anywhere from depraved to wonderful, or just beautiful joy, but it can also be terrible in a sense. And then you can also have a state of excitement, like just someone dancing in the same place in such a state of excitement it resembles madness, right? Like kids at rave parties. And that is how he sees it, a state of excitement. And he says when he feels that way, when he has this rush, he thinks about eternity and eternal life, which to me, I mean, don't you agree? Doesn't that sound like someone who has got a very cerebral handle on their thoughts and feelings? Um, can you imagine if you got extremely excited and then you thought about eternity? It's quite a thing to say. And one of the movies made on Van Gogh starring Willem Dafoe was called At Eternity's Gate. Anyway, he says, I must beware of my nerves. And as I say, this is kind of something that art historians would probably write down every line and say, you see, he's mad. Here he said it over and over again, he's mad. Well, this is like the only reference to it in how many letters. Now, I would be the first person to say, if he was writing this way in letter after letter after letter, then I would say, absolutely, this guy is struggling with depression. This guy is struggling with excitement or nervous excitement or anxiety. This guy is struggling with his own mental state, but he's not. He's struggling with it now, certainly, but you can't say because he's mentioning it here under these circumstances, which are understandable, that he's been struggling with it all along. Not to this extent. He's struggling, it's at a peak for a very good reason because of asshole Gauguin, right? Christina says creativity is a spiritual experience. Okay, so let's continue. He says, only I tell you this because you are mistaken in thinking that I have any mistrust of these two Dutch painters in any way. So he's saying, I'm telling you this. I'm telling you all this stuff about madness because I don't have any mistrust of these painters. That's what it's in reference to. He says, but it was really only after your second letter that I could form any idea of what they are doing, and I'm very curious to see the photographs of their drawings. I should like to write you a letter expressly for them to read, to explain once again why I believe I am in the South, both for the present and the future. Can you see how this letter, which seems to be slightly unhinged at a certain point, now is basically making a very calm statement of commitment. This is why I'm here, and I'm here for the long haul. It's not really unhinged at all. Then he says, and to say at the time, and to say at the same time how right I think it is to see a tendency toward great things in the Impressionist movement, and not only a school which would confine itself to optical experiments. Now, let me just ask you the following. Imagine you're an art expert and you are your boss or your whatever your mission is to find exclusively all the material that supports the idea that Van Gogh was struggling with mental illness or that Van Gogh was going crazy. That was your mandate. Go through his letters, almost do like a word search and ignore everything that's not to do with that, but just focus on the references to madness, right? Right. And let's say you came upon this and you said, wow, this is gold. This proves he took his own life, right? This proves that he was losing his marbles, right? And if you put that card on my table, I would say, excuse me, so if he's going mad, but he's writing about it, he's writing about feelings of craziness, and then the very next thing he continues writing, and he's not writing about craziness. It's not like the whole letter is crazy, crazy from the top to bottom. What I'm trying to say is he's observing feelings of excitement, and then he continues on a different subject. It's not like he gets so consumed and caught up in like a frenzy that he eventually like signs his name like in a big scroll and then the letter ends. I mean, how mad or crazy can you be if you write about craziness and then you continue writing your letter? I mean, it's so stupid. It's really stupid. Um, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but I read a book, I think by Michael Crichton. Um, it started with a D. Why can't I remember the name of it now? Was it called Disclosure? I think it was called Disclosure. And it's the movie version starred Demi Moore. And anyway, shall I just bring up that book quickly? And there's a moment in the movie and in the book where the character Michael Douglas, I think, is being seduced or something is happening with a co-worker, and then they're kind of in the middle of, or they're about to commence you know what, when she coughs, and then basically he recovers his sanity and he puts a stop to everything, right? That's how I seem to remember the story. And then when all of this ended up in a deposition or court or whatever it was, because I think they were trying to get him fired over sexual harassment, but he was actually being sort of like a kind of entrapment. Um, he mentions that he knew that this wasn't a real, authentic thing taking place when she coughed in the middle of it, right? And I'm just saying, if yeah, I don't know why I'm thinking of that. It's almost just like if she did cough and he just continued doing that, it wouldn't really make any sense. It's the same, in a way, maybe it's not a very good example, but it's the same, him writing about madness. Well, would it be really that serious if he then continued writing? If he was getting so excited? I don't know if it's a really good example. Okay, so let's continue. I see quite a few people writing LOL. Okay, then he says, as for those who are doing historical painting, or at least have done it in the past, if there are some really bad historical painters like De La Roche and Delors, aren't there also some good ones like Eugene Delacroix and Meissonier? It's actually amazing how often he mentions Delacroix. Anyway, since I have the fixed intention not to paint for at least 3 days, perhaps I shall rest myself by writing to you and to them at the same time. So a lot of this letter is to do with these other painters. Although he's fussing about Gauguin, he's not like so obsessed about the idea that he can't think or talk about anything else. And of course, what's going to happen when Gauguin arrives in all? It's going to become all about Gauguin, right? And we want to see if that occurs in those letters. Anyway, since I have the fixed intention not to paint for at least 3 days, perhaps I shall rest myself by writing to you and to them at the same time. So here he's saying is trying to deal with his own condition, and his solution seems to be, I'm going to not paint for 3 days. That'll help get me back on track. And I kind of have that sometimes when I'm working. I will get really, really serious backache just from working constantly. And the solution is quite simple: move, get out of your chair, um, work less, right? Um, Take your dog for longer walks, which is how Timmy ended up getting that condition he had in, because it was quite a long walk to get there. Anyway, he says, you know that the influence Impressionism will have on the Dutch painters and on the Dutch collectors. You know that rather interests me. Then he seems to make a reference to that picture. There's something very folksy about some of his art, right? Okay. Here is a very vague sketch of my last canvas: a row of green cypresses against a pink sky with a pale lemon crescent. The foreground is vague land and sand and some thistles. Two lovers, the man in pale blue with a yellow hat, and a woman with a pink bodice and black skirt. So yeah, you've got to almost imagine this suit is pale blue, I guess, and his hat's yellow. That makes the fourth canvas of the Poet's Garden, which is the decoration for Gauguin's bedroom. I must say, if I was Gauguin, I would be like, really? You're going to be putting that in my bedroom? That's not terribly good, in my opinion. Um, so there is a reference to Gauguin, and then he says, I dread to have to ask you for money again, but I can't help it. And even so, I'm broke again. Can you see how you're only going to know this by having read every single letter up until this point, that this is not the Van Gogh we know. This is not typical. He does ask for money quite often, but he doesn't is not this desperate, right? Is not normally this desperate. And what is making him so desperate? Who is making him so desperate? Well, we know. And so, Stephanie, I'm doing a lot better. My back isn't hurting. I'm fairly balanced, but yeah, I mean, once this month's over, I'm definitely going to be prioritizing exercise, and it's just been so cold that one can stay indoors and work. So thanks for that. Um, Can you see how, I mean, just that word dread, I dread to have to ask you, you kind of see how Van Gogh, I mean, whose fault is it? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Whose fault is it that he's getting so stressed? Whose fault is it? Cicilline. What do you guys say? You know the situation, you know the context that we're in. Whose fault is it that he's getting so stressed? Is it the fact that because he doesn't have money? Is it the fact that because he can't sell his art? Is it Gauguin's fault? Is it Theo's fault? Whose fault is it that he's getting so stressed? It's his own fault, right? And he can, because it's his own fault, he can also be the solution. So, for example, don't spend so much money on furniture. Eat instead. Don't paint so much. Eat instead. It's all up to him, self-management. That's all he's got to do, is self-management. But the point is, this is where we are on the 21st of October, where we're going to be on the 21st of November, where we're going to be on the 21st of December. In other words, what we're seeing here is how the mechanism where Van Gogh can become overly excited and he can lose track of things like money and get himself kind of overloaded, right? We're seeing we're seeing a demonstration which might later be a precedent, if that makes sense. Robbie Robbins says, what kind of conditions was Gauguin used to living in? Well, bear in mind, Gauguin had been married. Well, he actually is married and he's got kids. So just that alone should tell you he was used to a different kind of lifestyle. I'll answer that question in more detail, but there's a point where Vincent draws a chair, one chair representing himself, another chair representing Gauguin. The chair representing Gauguin's like much more ornate and fluffy and beautiful colors. And I think that maybe to some extent answers your question. It's true that he should have, but you can also understand that it would be quite difficult. Because he's a good guy, and because his heart's kind of in the right place, he's overdoing things, right? And also, he's imagining this is going to be for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever. Meanwhile, it's actually only going to last 2 months. All of this effort that he's putting in now is going to be undone in about 2 months. Okay. So he says, I think that someday the work I do by spending a little more will seem a better bargain to us than the earlier stuff. Besides, I'd already told you, if it had been possible to make a deal with Thomas, I should have dearly liked to be able to put even 200 francs more into the work before Gauguin's arrival. That is what all of this is really about. Before Gauguin's arrival, what are we going to do before Gauguin's arrival? And Gauguin just never arrives. He hasn't arrived yet. Let's do this. Oh, he still hasn't arrived. Let's get that sorted out. Oh, he still isn't here. Maybe we can do this still. And so it just stretches out. It stretches him out further and further, more and more. As it could not be, I've nevertheless pushed what I was working on as far as I could in my great desire to be able to show him something new and not to be subjected to his influence, right? And so, yeah, he says in his own words, his great desire to be able to show him something new, but he says, I was working on as far as I could. It's almost like I've been pushing myself because I want to show him something. Bear in mind, it's not just that he's hosting another artist. He's almost like Stockton Rush. He's uncertified. He hasn't sold a painting. And he's having Victor Vescovo, sorry for these silly examples, but he's having Victor Vescovo come and stay with him for a while. And he wants to impress Victor with his work. But he knows he's got a lot of work to do. And he says, you know what? I'm going to be subjected to his influence. When he comes here, I'm going to be at the mercy of his personality. I know he's got a strong personality. So I need to produce some art that's going to stand up to his criticism. I need to have some not cachet, but I need to have something tangible to stand on, I guess, like almost like a platform. So he says, before I can show him indubitably my own individuality, he's trying to show him, I've found my voice. Don't tell me kind of what to do. You know, you can give me some tips but don't like don't turn me into you. I already know who I am. And it's almost like he's trying to, at the last minute, like students studying for an exam, cram his art so that he can say, can you see what I'm trying to do? But it's also like even that's not quite ready yet. So he's rushing that aspect. So he says, he will see that, however, in the decoration as it is now. I beg you, if it is in any way possible, send me another. So there it is again. I beg you. He doesn't often use this language. Send me another 50 francs at once. I do not quite know how I shall be able to get through without it. I'm very glad you have read Tartarin. I do hope that you'll be able to write me no later than by return mail. Okay. And now on to the 22nd of October. I've been to this public park. It's quite a nice picture. There you see the autumn colors. There's a lady sitting on a bench. Some other people on that corner over there also sitting on a bench. So he says, my dear Theo, this is 22nd of October. I've done another size study canvas, an autumn garden with 2 cypresses, bottle green shaped like bottles, and 3 little chestnut trees with tobacco and orange colored leaves, and a little yew tree with pale citron foliage and a violet trunk. 2 little bushes, blood red and scarlet purple leaves. I guess these are the cypresses. And some sand, some grass, and some blue sky. Some blue sky, and I guess some sand and some grass. And yet I'd sworn to myself that I would not work. So we are getting a little bit more understanding of how this whole process plays out. Van Gogh gets really excited, and his work is both a blessing and a curse. It keeps his mind focused on certain things, but he should also occasionally rest, right? And so you could theoretically make the argument that it's now October and he's getting into a state of feverish excitement, painting a lot, getting nervous about Gauguin's arrival, and then that ends in him losing his ear. Maybe he did have something to do with it, right? The next couple of letters between November and December are going to tell us the answer. Does he calm down? Does he recover his energy? Does he become even more excited? And then the other thing that's really important in the story is also, what about Gauguin? What's Gauguin's state of mind? Does Gauguin become calm, or does he become angry? Does Gauguin become sort of resigned, or is he enjoying himself, or does he become frustrated and irritated? Which one? I mean, so we need to, as soon as Gauguin arrives, we need to accommodate him into our kind of calculus in terms of what exactly happened. Chelsea, I'm actually also going to probably go and watch Mission Impossible tomorrow as a way to celebrate my little channel milestone. So I'll be asking you some questions about the movie to make sure you went. Yeah, he is very driven. Okay. Stephanie's put the link to the letter in if you want to follow. Now we're going to go to the next paragraph. He says, but it is like that. It is like that every day. Just accidentally, I sometimes come upon things so lovely that I have to try to do them after all. So what's the reason that he ends up painting this picture? He is walking around and he sees something so beautiful, he just can't help it but to paint it. I kind of had that when I was in America. You travel, you travel, and then you kind of want to take a day off. You kind of want to just veg in your hotel room, or just whatever, read or watch TV or whatever. And then you end up being tempted by the things that you've seen, or the things you suppose you are going to see. He says, well, the money which you're giving me and which I keep on asking for now more than ever, I will pay you back. I will pay back to you in work, and not only for the present, but for the past as well. It's quite a, again, I've often said that he'd make a really good lawyer. Um, he's kind of saying, at the same time that he's saying, can you please send me 50 francs, like right now? Can you please send me this? He's saying, you know what? I'm not only going to pay you back what you're sending me right now. I'm going to be paying you back everything you've ever sent me. So can you just send me the stuff that I've asked for? It's kind of quite a clever argument. Is it very realistic? He says, but let me work as long as it is not absolutely impossible. For it would be so much worse if I did not take advantage of the opportunities. Oh, my dear boy, if only I could do something, or if Gauguin and I, between us, could do such things that Saray would join hands with us. But in my opinion, we must put his big pictures of the models and the Grand Jut down. Well, let me see, say at 5,000 apiece at the lowest. Well, if we combine, Gauguin and I also ought to be good for a nominal capital of 10,000 each. He's talking pretty big bucks, right? He's talking a big game. Once more, that squares exactly with what I was telling you, that I was determined to do 10,000 francs worth of paintings for the house. And I mean, without being nasty, he's not going to see really any of that. He's talking about 10,000 francs. He's not going to see 10 francs. The Red Vineyard, I think he gets something like, I don't want to lie, is it 300 francs or 3,000 francs? I think he gets 350 francs for the Red Vineyard. That's a fraction of what he's talking about there. It is odd that though I do not calculate with figures, but with what I feel, I so often come to the same results after starting from absolutely divergent points of view. I do not dare to say anything more of this Surrey combination. First, I must try to get to know Gauguin better. When we have him, we can't lose anyhow. Well, actually, you are going to lose big time. I think this is also a interesting departure from, he comes across as a pilgrim, he comes across as a monk, he comes across as a guy who lives, kind of ekes out a living. He comes across as someone who's extremely low maintenance. And yeah, he's talking about 10,000 francs worth of paintings, just like that. He hasn't sold anything, and he's just plucking that number out of nowhere. And you kind of got to ask yourself, is that realistic? And it's kind of a strange question, because on paper it's extremely unrealistic. And of course, history shows that his work would be worth not 10,000 francs, not 100,000 francs, not 1,000,000 francs, but, I mean, one of his pictures sold for $90 million. It's quite a lot of money. Then he talks about the tubes that he wants. Flake white and zinc white and chrome yellow, Prussian blue, geranium, malachite green. He wants the biggest tubes of malachite green, but only medium tubes of geranium lake. He says, I must say that I should be absolutely astonished if we could not first overcome the existing difficulties of production, no matter what. If there's a hitch, we shall have to take counsel as soon as Gauguin comes, which I'm hoping for from one day to the next. I think that it may make a nice stir at the exhibition in '89. What do you think he's talking about when he says that? What's he talking about? Yeah. Well, it's a significant amount, but it's not that significant compared to $90 million, right? But thanks a lot for doing that calculation. Oh, hang on, I see what you're saying. You're saying 10,000 francs translated right now is 2,000 francs today. Yeah, so that is actually quite significant. But I mean, it's still like bluster because he's not selling anything. He is talking a big game, so that's absolutely right. It is the World Fair. The exhibition in '89 that he's referring to is the World Fair. And as much as you might criticize him and say he's being unrealistic, he's overextending himself, blah, 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 it's the World Fair in 1889, which is 3 months away. I mean, the year is 3 months away. Um, so a lot of the work and the effort he's putting in is, in a sense, aimed at this massive um, group of people that are going to be coming to the World Fair in Paris. And he wants to have something to show. He wants to have something to exhibit. It's his big opportunity for a break. And one's got to think hypothetically, if he didn't lose his ear and he didn't end up in the asylum, what could have happened if he did exhibit at the World Fair? Could he have sold some of his art, and what would have happened after that? And I think one way to answer that, and to be honest, to be absolutely honest, I don't actually know the answer to this. I wish I did. I just don't know Gauguin's story that well. I actually need to get hold of a biography on Gauguin. But I would be very interested to know, what did Gauguin do in 1889? Did he not exhibit at the World Fair? Did he not do fairly well? Or did he, um, I was going to say, did he go off to Tahiti? But I think he was still in France in 1890 when Van Gogh died. So it's not like he skedaddled. So if Gauguin was in France in 1889 and he was ending 1888 on kind of quite a good wicket, then what is the chance that he didn't exhibit? And if he did exhibit, did that give him like a great launching pad into the rest of his art legacy and so on and so on? It's quite an interesting question. Do you agree? Yeah, it was a huge opportunity. It was the biggest opportunity of an artist's life, arguably, if you think about it. It's almost like me going to CrimeCon in America with having just published a book or something like that. Okay, let's continue. I mean, going to CrimeCon as a guest, not as a visitor. Anyway, he says it might be more convenient if it didn't make a hit. But anyway, we must really take things as they come. So that's what he's thinking about. Is this really the mind of a madman, or is this someone who is aware of his surroundings, is aware of the calendar, is aware of um, needing to network, is aware of opportunities? I mean, if you were in this situation, wouldn't you be going quite crazy trying to keep up with what you need to be doing to be ready? I mean, that's normal stress, normal work ethic. It's not insanity. Christina says artists cannot help but to be optimistic. Okay. So then he says, by the way, have you ever read Les Frères Zengano by the Goncourt brothers? He often mentions them. If not, read it. That kind of suggests that in the middle of all of this stress is reading another book. You know, when he finishes writing the letter, and remember he's sort of alone, he finishes writing the letter, um, makes maybe a finishing touch on an artwork or whatever, lights another candle by his bedside, and reads one, two, three, four chapters of the latest book. He says, it might be more daring perhaps if I had not read it, and even after reading it, my only fear is of asking you for too much money. If I come to grief myself in the attempt, it would do me no harm, and in that case, I still have some resource, for I should either go into business or I should write. But as long as I am painting, I see nothing for it but the association of several fellows and a life in common. Oh, that's interesting. Stephanie seems to be doing some background research for us. Thanks a lot. Interesting. Okay. What does he say? It's quite ironic, his words. He says, if I come to grief in the attempt, and he's talking about trying to make a stir at the exhibition. That's exactly what he did do. He came to grief in the attempt. That's exactly what happened. It would do me no harm. No, it will do you great harm. Um, he says, this is quite interesting as well. He says, in that case, in other words, if I came to grief, I have still some resource, for I should either go into business or I should write. So can you see what's kind of happening here is you kind of get the feeling this is his magnum opus. This is kind of his last kind of explosion of effort, where you sort of get the feeling um, it's now or never for Van Gogh. This is how he sees it. This is my now or never. And even if I fail, well, then and again, it's not like he's going to commit suicide if he fails and he can't handle failure. He says, if if nothing happens, I'll go into business or I'll write. And so it's quite interesting. He kind of sees himself as a writer already at this point, and I think he makes quite a good writer. He says, I should maybe go into business. So he's already, to some extent, a little bit letting go of being an artist. He's sort of, I don't know if he's saying it just for his brother's benefit. But anyway, he says, as long as I'm in painting, as long as I am painting, I see nothing for it but the association of several fellows and a life in common. Then the leaves have begun to fall. You can see the trees turning yellow and the yellow increasing every day. It is at least as beautiful as the orchards in bloom. And as for the work we are doing, I venture to think that far from losing it, we shall make a profit. So much for that. In any case, please send by return mail, and certainly not later, some more money, 50 if possible, or else less. And if you haven't time to write, please send it by money order, either more or less, depending on what you can spare. A good handshake, ever yours, Vincent. Um, when he says here, send me that or 50 if possible, and then he says, either more or less, it reminds me of the quote by Sherlock Holmes where he says, if convenient, come to, what is it, something Baker Street. And then in brackets, he writes, if inconvenient, come all the same. It just reminds me a little bit of that. Okay. To me, I don't know if I must pick you up if you're going to fart again. So here's a letter, another fairly rare letter. We don't often see letters from Theo to Vincent van Gogh, 23rd of October. How many letters are left in October? 24 and, oh, what did I do there? 24, 27, also Theo, and 28. 28. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through October, but I'll try and get through a couple more letters. Okay. Okay, Timmy, you better not be a naughty dog. So in this letter, we get the right response from Theo. He says, it's really distressing to me that you're not feeling well, right? And in a way, we should be distressed too. You know, we are starting to see evidence of him going downhill, right? It is to be supposed that you have worked too hard and consequently have forgotten to take proper care of your body. That is exactly right. He's worked too hard. Who's to blame? No one except him. But these are the circumstances in which he kind of becomes overwhelmed. I'm glad that your letter arrived today, for within a very short time, I should have gone off to Brussels, in which case you would have had to wait at least 2 more days. What a financier you are. At least he's got a good sense of humor. What causes me so much grief is that, notwithstanding all that, you are always so miserably hard up because you cannot refrain from doing all kinds of things for others. And so, yeah, you actually get it actually makes me feel almost like crying. Just you've got his own brother recognizing um, an aspect that is just so true and so genuine. Is despite his um, not feeling well, he's putting in a lot of effort all on behalf of somebody else in a particular from a particular perspective. You see Van Gogh as a very generous person, a very kind, thoughtful person. And that is what Theo sees. He says, you cannot refrain from doing all kinds of things for others. Isn't that a beautiful thing for his brother to say to him? And isn't it true? Yeah, but not. Okay. Well, he's a lot more ill than he's been. Hi, Sharon. So he says, I should greatly like to see you more egotistic, at least until your budget balances better. In other words, he's saying, I'd really like you to think about yourself more. I'd really like you to put yourself first, right? You will understand that Father Thomas has given me the cold shoulder. You should have approached him yourself and all that. Now let's try to wriggle out of the difficulty. The others will come to us of their own accord. You'll be pleased to learn that I sold the big picture of Gauguin's Les Bretons, which has been on exhibition at Diot's. I'm sending him 500 francs. So for the moment, he will be quite well off. And so you can see at this point where Gauguin is so also quite hard up, Theo comes through for him and sends him quite a lot of money. And Theo must be thinking, wow, Timmy, jeez. Ah, um, he must be thinking, wow, you know what? I think Theo could really get me out of this hole. And isn't that exactly what does happen? Because his art continues to sell going into December, right? But you can see how this money for the sale of that painting features into Gauguin suddenly getting off his ass and going to all, right? It's because of this good luck, but also thanks to Theo's efforts. Let's have a look at this particular picture. It could be this one. It could be this one. Quite interesting. He painted this in 1894, so it's not that one. Sorry, it's not that one. I actually saw another one that is it this one? I think this is the one that is sold. This one was painted in 1888 in Ponthofen. Doesn't say anything more than 1888, but this is the picture. It's quite cute. And in a way, you almost feel like you can travel through time and see this moment come to life. There's even a little dog in the picture. Looks like it might be a schnauzer. And so this is the picture that sells for, I don't know if it's 500 francs, but Theo sends down 500 francs. I would love to know how much she actually got for the picture. Was it 500 francs? De Haan is coming this week and he will stay with me for some time, which is very pleasant for me. For he will probably become the central figure of a group of young people here for a while. So that's the other thing to bear in mind is at the moment, Gauguin, even let's put it this way, even at the moment Gauguin arrives in Arles, which is going to be like now in the next day or so, like October 24th or something like that. He's just sold another painting. He basically arrives in all kind of triumphantly. I've just sold another painting, right? And you can imagine Vincent van Gogh feeling pleased, inspired, jealous, happy, impressed with his guest who is doing what he wants to do, what he's been trying to do for weeks, months, days, weeks, months, years. He's doing. I sold a picture yesterday. You can imagine that you want to be around a guy like that. Like, what are you doing that I need to do? Like, how can I have some of that Gauguin magic rub off on me, right? And Gauguin might say, I'll tell you what, I'll cut off your ear and that'll make you famous. Anyway, so let's go back to the letter. So he says, from your previous letter, I get the impression that you believe that these fellows know all the answers to all the questions in the manner of the Dutch. But if you have formed such an opinion, it's my fault. When I told you that they know how to analyze a picture, taking as their starting point a feeling for the technique and so on, I did not mean to say that they separate the qualities. What I really meant to allude to was their singular clarity of mind, which prevents them from mixing things up. Isaacson particularly gives me the impression of a true scholar. They have now received pictures and studies done in Holland, very good, only a bit dark. It is their intention to stay in Paris during the winter and then to start for the country, as soon as the weather permits them to travel out of town. I intend to return from Brussels on Friday or Saturday, and I hope to be able to write you a letter less hurriedly soon. I hope your indisposition is not serious, and you will not lose courage, even if Gauguin should not come. Okay. And now we go to the 24th of October. And there it is. Gauguin has arrived in good health. And this is the picture that he brings with him. This is not very nice compared to the one we've just looked at, but it's quite interesting. And so here it is. He says, 24th of October, quite easy to remember, 24888. My dear Theo, thanks for your letter and the 50-franc note. As you learned from my wire, Gauguin has arrived in good health. He gives me the impression he's even better than me. So despite Gauguin complaining about he's too sick to paint, when he arrives, Van Gogh is like, oh my God, you a lot healthier than I am. You're a lot stronger than me. Naturally, he's very pleased with the sale you have effected, and I no less, since in this way certain expenses absolutely necessary for the installation need not wait and will not weigh wholly on your shoulders. Gauguin will certainly write you today. So something else that I think you can anticipate taking place is Gauguin arrives and he's all flush, and isn't he going to want to celebrate? Isn't he going to want to have a couple of drinks with his new pal, well, with his new housemate? Isn't he going to want to go to a brothel, right? Aren't they going to get the party started like without delay? It's like he's going to arrive and they're going to go full speed ahead. I'm asking. We will find out. He says he is very very interesting as a man, and I have every confidence that we shall do loads of things with him. He will probably produce a great deal here, and I hope perhaps I shall too. Well, that turned out not to be the case. I think he may have painted 2 or 3 pictures in all, something like that. He says, and then I dare hope that the burden will be a little less heavy for you, and I even hope much less heavy. I myself realize the necessity to produce, even to the extent of being morally crushed and physically drained by it, just because after all I have no other means of ever getting back whatever we have spent. So here you have, and then he says, I cannot help it that my pictures do not sell. Here you have Van Gogh in the very next letter, after the bust of 10,000 francs, basically seeing the light in a way, basically seeing the fact that Gauguin has actually just sold a picture, and he says he feels morally crushed, he feels physically drained, but in other words, by this constant output, and then people don't buy his art. Constant output, consistent output, this regular, seemingly indefatigable, investment, effort. You see that he is fatiguing. He is losing a little bit of heart, right? Anyone would be, and he's saying, what can I do except to just keep going? I mean, what should I do? He says, the day will come when people will see that they are worth more than the price of the paint and my own living, very meager after all that is put into them. What a incredible statement, because that would be so true. That would be so true. That did happen. I have no other desire nor any other interest as to money or finance than primarily to have no debts. But my dear boy, my debt is so great that when I've paid it, when all the same I hope to succeed in doing, the pains of producing pictures will have taken my whole life from me. I know when I was writing my books, between basically the age of 40 and 50, that's what it felt like for me, was like a lost decade. I basically wrote non-stop for 10 years, a little bit less than that, about 8 years. And I felt just like I was bleeding to death. I was just working, working, working. And I'm sort of coming out of that now, trying to, um, what's the word, balance things. I think if you're not in a relationship, and Van Gogh wasn't either, if you don't have a girlfriend or whatever, it's easy to, and you enjoy your work, it's easy to get caught up in your work. You know what I mean? But he has this feeling. I feel like my life's been stolen from me, but I mean, he's given himself to his art, right? Today I was. I don't know if you guys watched the tennis. Um, that's that's good to hear. Did anyone here watch Wimbledon? Um, I was just looking at, in a sort of a cerebral way. I was looking at Djokovic and just thinking, you hit tennis balls for a living. You're not having a bad life for someone who hits tennis balls. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to get there. So anyway, so yeah, he talks about. So can you see how? So this is what I want to say. Can you see how, when Gauguin is now in all, and for the next probably 3, 4 Van Gogh letters, the next 3, 4, maybe 5 episodes, they're going to be in the context that Gauguin is there, right? And so every time he writes a letter, Gauguin is maybe in the room next door, but is basically when he could be talking to Gauguin, or he could be drinking with Gauguin, or he could be, I don't know, walking in town with Gauguin, or whatever it is. But the point is, he's writing these letters with Gauguin right there in the same house. And so everything is pretty immediate. Gauguin just said to me, blah, 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 right? Um, so that's the one thing. What's the other thing? The other thing is the double-edged sword of, he's given so much, is made this place available to Gauguin, right? And he's been so excited, and he's been so looking forward to it, and he so respects Gauguin, blah blah blah. But the other side of that is the the other side of that sword, the two-edged sword, is he kind of realizes Gauguin is a success. Gauguin paints a picture and he sells it. And it just makes that, in other words, that reality hits him so much harder than if he was just painting by himself. Now he's forced to compare himself unfavorably to Gauguin. Let me say that again. Right now, and for the next 2 months and more, he's going to be comparing himself unfavorably for the most part. I mean, there's certain areas where he'll say, I won't do that, and I'm an individual, and I prefer this. But at the end of the day, he realizes Gauguin is succeeding, I'm not. Whatever Gauguin's doing is working, whatever I'm doing isn't working. In the reality of the now, right? And so that's going to hit him on top of the stress that he's already been feeling. In other words, he's going to feel disheartened more than he normally feels disheartened. He's going to feel exhausted more than he normally feels exhausted. In other words, at the time Gauguin arrives, Gauguin is kind of starting to become revitalized. Gauguin is starting to become um, more what's the word? It's just he's kind of coming back to life in a way. Gauguin, he's not just is going to be. It's like somebody winning the lottery. That person's going to start suddenly doing quite a lot of different things. Whereas Van Gogh, at the time that Gauguin arrives, Van Gogh is beaten down. He's worn himself out, and now, having worn himself out, he's still not selling his art. It's like a double, triple blow. There's so many dimensions to how depressing it is, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's finish this letter. He says, now, to make a statement like that, the pains of producing pictures will have taken my whole life from me. That is, he's saying that because he's just gotten the perspective that, wow, Gauguin is enjoying life. Gauguin has come here, and I wouldn't say that he had a birthday cake, but he came into all, and he had a nice meal, and he, you know, had a fun night or whatever he did. And Van Gogh, although he's happy for his friend, I think there's a part of him that's looking on, thinking, I've been like a dead person, just working all this time. This is what happens when you sell a painting. This is what you can enjoy life again. And he's thinking, I'm not really having any of that. I'm not enjoying life, right? And it's hitting him through Gauguin, the reality of what an artist experiencing success can feel like. Bear in mind, he hasn't ever felt that because he's never, up until this point, he's never sold a painting. So he hasn't gotten that little, okay, here's 500 francs, go and have fun. He hasn't had that experience a single time. Every time he gets money from Theo, he feels guilty. Anyway, so him saying, making this statement, the pains of producing pictures will have taken my whole life, that is coming from this forced perspective because Gauguin's kind of in the house. Yeah, alcohol I don't think helped his self-loathing. I'm sure Gauguin said, hey, have a drink. And then he had one. Bridget, Yvonne is not well. She let me know that she's not well, and I did follow up, and she didn't respond. So, yeah, she's unfortunately not well. Silent Murmur says Gauguin didn't seem to deserve all that good luck, really. Yeah, it's one's got to kind of ask why did the one artist succeed? At this point. Okay, let's continue. The only thing is that perhaps the production of the pictures will become a little more difficult for me. And as to numbers, there will not always be so many. It is agonizing to me that there is no demand for them now. Can you see, up until now in his letters, he doesn't really use words like that. He doesn't say, it's agonizing that I can't sell my work. If anything, he sounds resigned or he sounds resilient. Gauguin arrives and now he's feeling agony. He's comparing himself to Gauguin, and all of this is completely normal and natural. It's completely to be expected that he would feel this way. He says, because you suffer for it, but as far as I'm concerned, if only you were not too worried by my bringing nothing in, it would pretty much be all the same to me. But in money matters, it is enough for me to realize this truth, that a man who lives for 50 years and spends 2,000 a year spent 100,000 francs and must bring in 100,000 francs again to do 1,000 pictures at 100 francs during one's life as an artist comes very, very, very hard. But even when the picture is at 100 francs once again, at at times our task is very heavy. There's no changing that. Can you see how he's feeling a bit blue about life? You never really see him talking in such a um, almost like a polarized way. It is again he's thinking about one's entire life, and maybe this is what Gauguin has said to him, right? And look at what he says here. One's life as an artist comes very, very, very hard. He's suddenly feeling kind of a bit sorry for himself. It's kind of quite unusual. And then he says, at times our task is very heavy. And you might say, if you this art critic or art expert or art historian, you might say, you see he's going down this path of miserable depression. He's going to take his life. You can see he's lost all hope. But then what does he say? There's no changing that. In other words, he is very disturbed by the difficult life that he has, but he says, you know what, there's no changing that. And then he carries on talking about other things. He says, we shall probably bypass Tasse altogether because to a large extent we are going to use cheaper colors, Gauguin as well as I. And in the same way, we are going to prepare the canvas ourselves. For a while, I had a feeling that I was going to be ill, but Gauguin's arrival has so taken my mind off it that I'm sure it will pass. It's quite interesting that he could feel himself kind of becoming ill. And it seems like he dodged a bullet in a way. I must not neglect my food for a time, and that is all, absolutely all there is to it. So that is the cure that he has for himself. You know what? I need to eat. I've kind of had that myself. Sometimes when I'm working really hard, I, like some people have 3 meals a day. Like it'll be like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're like, cheapers, I should actually have some breakfast now. You know what I mean? I've been there myself. Um, it's quite a simple. It's quite a simple medicine. Eat. Don't forget to eat. And now that Gauguin is with him, I'm sure Gauguin won't forget to eat. Gauguin doesn't paint as quickly or is not as productive as Van Gogh, and he doesn't need to be. He says, I hope he didn't substitute food for drink. Okay, then he says, and after a time you will have some work again. Gauguin bought a magnificent canvas which he has exchanged with Bernard. Breton woman in a green field, white, black, green, and a note of red and dull flesh tints. After all, we must all be of good cheer. Oh, so this is, I was going to say, this must have been Gauguin on an off day, but this is actually Bernard's picture. You can see it's kind of got a Gauguin flavor to it, but it's not quite as good or as balanced as Gauguin. I was going to say, I thought that was quite a bad Gauguin, but anyway, there you go. Anyway, so he says, after all, we must all be of good cheer. Probably that is something that Gauguin said to him. Cheer up, pal, your time will come. Have another drink. I believe that the time will come when I too shall sell, but I'm so far behind with you. But I'm so far behind with you. And while I go on spending, I bring nothing in. Sometimes the thought of it saddens me. So is this the sign of someone who doesn't want to live anymore? Or is this the sign of someone who's conscientious, someone who feels bad, feels guilty, feels a sense of burden and a sense of debt because of the sheer amount of money that he's consuming from his brother. I'm very glad of what you write, that one of the Dutchmen is coming to stay with you, and so that you will not be alone anymore, and it's all right. So you kind of get the sense that both brothers are quite lonely, but both brothers, like you can imagine if the following was the situation. If Vincent was writing to his brother, and his brother had a lot of, his brother was, let's say, French, and he was French, and his brother was going out in Paris with his pals, and he wasn't an expat, and his brother was married, and his brother had kids. He wouldn't have time to be writing all of these letters back to him, and he'd probably say, you know what, I can't really look after you. I'm sorry. I've kind of got other fish to fry. Sorry. You can come and stay with me, and I'll do my best, but sorry. So I can't actually finish this letter. I've got to go and bathe one of the kids or whatever, you know. But it's because it's because Theo is also alone and struggling and working really hard, that these brothers have got so much in common. And so he says, and now I'm in a hurry and must go out and set to work again on another size 30 canvas. And I'm sure you can tell that Vincent's letters are already getting shorter because he can't spend the whole evening writing a letter because he's got a guest. His guest wants to talk to him. His guest wants to have coffee with him. His guest wants him to look at a picture that he's done or an article in the newspaper, or can you fix the the gas in the kitchen or whatever it is. Very soon, when Gauguin writes, I'll add another letter to his. Naturally, I don't know beforehand what Gauguin will say of this country and of our life, but in any case, he is very pleased with the good sale you have managed for him. So Gauguin hasn't said, wow, I love it here. Gauguin hasn't said, well, thanks so much for this house. You've really done a great job. He's basically is pleased with Theo's sale. That seems to be all that Vincent can say about it. He hasn't said, well, Gauguin has been so. Gauguin gave me a hug after he saw his room, and he patted me on the back. Nothing like that. So the 24th of October is, I think, when Gauguin arrived. He may have arrived the day before, but by now Gauguin is in Arles. And I think we're going to do one more. Or we're going to do one more letter. Let's do one more letter. Okay. Right. So here we go. Last letter. 27 October 1888. My dear Vincent, I was overjoyed to find your telegram and your letter in reply to my first one when I got back from Brussels. I'm sending you a post office money order, for although it is possible that Gauguin received the letter I addressed to him in Ponthaven, thinking he was still there, there's also the possibility that you have not received it. And as you are two now, it'll be harder to have enough to live on than when you were alone. Why don't you try get credit with some purveyor of food in case I'm not there, as happened a short while ago? Or if it is impossible for me to send the money at once, I'm very happy that Gauguin is with you, for I was afraid that he had encountered some obstacle which prevented him from coming. So I think you get a sense there from Theo that even Theo understands that Gauguin is a bit of a selfish bastard, right? He says, now I see from your letter that you are unwell and that you are worrying a good deal. I want to tell you something once and for all. I look upon it all as though the question of money and the sale of pictures and the whole financial side did not exist, or rather existed as a disease. Isn't that a wonderful, generous statement from Theo? I suppose it's possible. I don't want to diminish what he's saying, but I suppose it's possible that if Theo got Vincent's share of their father's inheritance, then it's not really a big deal giving him a certain amount of money because it's kind of his money to begin with. And I mean that's a narrative that I dealt with in my book. The financial narratives in terms of the Van Goghs. But can you see he's quite generous about this. He says, in terms of the question of money, I don't even see that side exists. You can imagine that is a tremendous relief for Van Gogh. You can imagine that is extremely reassuring. As it is certain that the money question will not disappear before a formidable revolution, or perhaps a series of revolutions, has come about, it is necessary to treat it like smallpox if one has caught it. It's quite interesting. I mean, even though he is making a point, he doesn't realize that there is a disease that is right now in the background. It's going to be front and center very soon in his life as well. But he says the question of money, he's saying that this difficulty they're dealing with, it's similar to something that existed as a disease. Well, Van Gogh does have a disease, so does his brother, a serious disease. Anyway, he says, that is to say, take the required precautions against accidents which may result, but don't bother your head about it. And a very big accident is about to happen as well. It's about to happen in 2 months. You have been thinking about it far too much lately, and although there may be no symptoms of an accident, you are suffering under it. By accidents, I mean misery, and in order to avoid arriving at this pass, it is necessary to make things easy and not to commit excesses. And can you see how his brother really knows him very well? And he says, take things easy, but don't take things. That doesn't mean go out and drink and go out and womanize. Just bring things down a notch. Don't, take your foot off the gas a little, but that doesn't mean you must now go and womanize and drink. But is the intense person that Van Gogh is capable of doing that? He says, and try to escape the other diseases as much as possible. Well, his brother knows what he's talking about there. You speak of money which you owe me and which you want to give back to me. I won't hear of it. Then he says, the condition I want you to arrive at is that you should never have any worries. I must work for the money. Seeing that we two together haven't got very much, we must see to it that we don't take too much on our shoulders. But apart from this consideration, we shall be able to go on for some time to come, even without selling anything. I don't know, when I read that, I can't help thinking of Theo as an incredibly heroic figure, an incredibly necessary figure to the legacy of Vincent van Gogh. It's really, what an incredible human being. How rare is it to find someone who would say this? And it's so important that he does say it. It's so important that Van Gogh does feel reassured, and thus, especially at this point, he's willing to pick up his paintbrush again and feel free. It's almost like his brother's allowing him to be born again as an artist. All your sins, all your debts are washed away. Wake up and enjoy the free air, my friend, kind of thing. Okay, it really is quite incredible. Then he says, if you very much feel the need of working for yourself, go ahead. say the word, and I think that notwithstanding this, we shall be able to stick it out. But I don't understand the calculations of so many pictures at 100 francs a piece. So he's saying, I reject that. Don't try and feel like you've got to make up for the loss of a life's work or whatever. If one wants them to be worth 100 francs, they're worth nothing at all. For the ignoble society we are living in is only on the side of those who do not stand in need of it. That is his view of society, that society is not very noble. And that is one really beautiful thing about the Van Gogh story, is that in the sense that his simple art, in a way, there's a lot of simplicity in Van Gogh's art. The fact that the world embraced that, there is something to some extent noble about that. I think. Then he says, but knowing this, let's do as society does, and let's say we don't stand in need of it. Isn't it true that a warned man counts as two? You may do something for me if you like, that is, go on as in the past, right? He's saying, if you go on as an artist, you're doing it for me as well, and create an entourage of artists and friends for us, something which I am absolutely incapable of doing by my own self. And so he feels like Vincent is doing some of the networking that he needs to do, but he just doesn't have the resources or the time, right? And he says, which you have been able to do more or less since you came to France. Isn't it true? So he's saying, you know, to his brother, you've been able to make friends and establish these relationships. I don't know if it's completely true. I don't know whether Theo's not trying to just soothe his brother and calm him down and reassure him, and maybe with a few things that are stretching the truth a little bit. I'm sure that Theo, um, I think Theo gets engaged in the next 2 months. So, you know, I don't know if he's absolutely incapable of making friends when he'll be engaged in about 2 months. Isn't it true that if the artists show the way, the others will follow suit? If the moment should come when we stand in need of it because of being unable to continue working as we are now, personally, I'm firmly convinced of it. You don't know how much pain you give me when you say that you have worked so hard that you feel as though you have not lived. When I wrote books with Lisa Wilson, um, I kind of said to her, I feel like death warmed up. And she also said, I've got to say, you guys have got no idea how hard it is to write a book. It just is so much work. Even, you might say, well, if you write a book in 2 weeks, is that really hard work? It is. You know, this doesn't just magically, these words don't just magically appear on paper. Someone's got to write them. Someone's got to find them. Someone's got to put them together. And then you're not finished. You've got to go back and find all the errors, and that's another hour and another hour and another hour and another hour and another day and another hour and another hour and another hour and another day, and it goes on and on and on. And it became a lot. It became kind of too much for me. It also became too much for Lisa. I mean, ultimately, you want to write a book, but then you want to walk away from it. Life isn't writing books. Although writing a book that sells and a book that reaches someone feels very meaningful and feels very sometimes necessary. But that is a very painful thing to talk about, to say you've worked so hard that you feel as though you've not lived. And I kind of feel that right now, just in the sense of I'm alive. I'm not a spring chicken anymore, but I'm 51, and I feel like I've achieved a little bit, and now I want to try and mix up some living, not like do no work whatsoever, but not be totally consumed with work. And now, and I mean, that was what my trip to America was about living, seeing, moving, experiencing, not working. Um, anyway, so he says, in the first place, I don't believe this is true, for in point of fact, you are living and living like the great ones of the earth and the aristocrats. Also, just a different perspective. Um, Sometimes when I speak to people, they say to me, I don't understand why you just don't go and work somewhere else. You can work anywhere in the world. Why don't you go and work somewhere? And that's why I'm thinking, what if I had a office somewhere in America where I could step out of the office and then you in, who knows, Manhattan or Texas or California or Connecticut or whatever. Wouldn't that be great? For a certain period of the year. You know, you step out of it and you're in this great country. Yeah. Okay, so let's get on with this letter. He says, but I beseech you, warn me in time in order that you may not feel that you have been living in misery and that you have fallen ill because you lacked a piece of bread to keep alive. I hope Gauguin's company will be pleasant for you and that you will recover within a very short time. Can you see how this letter is necessary for Vincent to feel that it's okay what he's doing? I mean, this is a really, really important letter in Van Gogh's life. I'm not just saying in 1888. It's a standout letter in his entire life because here Theo absolutely unambiguously says, you have my support, don't feel bad, keep doing what you're doing, and things are fine, right? He basically shows his brother that he has his back, right? At a time that he's really broken down and he hasn't really got anything to show for it. It's not as though he wrote this letter after the sale of the Red Vineyard, after the good review that he got. This letter comes before that. This letter is sort of in the context of, well, Gauguin has just done that. You know, he doesn't even guilt trip his brother. He doesn't say, yeah, you know, Gauguin has actually just sold a picture. Anyway, I will send you another 50 francs. He doesn't do that at all. Even in the context of what's happened with Gauguin, he basically says, um, you know what, it is tough. Um, things aren't so bad. You know, keep going, but take care of your health, right? And he says, warn me in time. Warn me in time. And that's another thing that's so important to emphasize here is Van Gogh tells his brother, he uses all these different words. He says how very, very hard things are, how very difficult things are, how um, he begs him for this, he begs him for that. You have none of this language in the summer of 1890 because he's not feeling overwhelmed in the summer of 1890. It's as simple as that. I hope Gauguin's company will be pleasant for you and that you will recover within a very short time. Unfortunately, not. Unfortunately, Gauguin's company is not going to be good for him. Maybe it will be in the first few days, but ultimately, it's going to be very bad for him. Then he says, I've not received the canvases yet. Did he send them off, or shall I get them through the agency of someone else? At Brussels, I made the acquaintance of De Groo's son, who is also an artist. I don't know if I, with respect, I don't know if I believe Theo when he says, you can do something that I'm incapable of doing which is that since you came to France, you made all of these friends. Theo has actually made quite a few friends as well. But anyway, yeah, he's mentioning another one. He says, unfortunately, it was on the last night of my stay there, so that I could not take a look at what he does. The movement in art we are having here seems to be zealously discussed, but also approved of over there, and it would be a good thing to organize a permanent exhibition at Brussels too. Dehaan is coming tomorrow to stay with me, which I'm very glad of. I'm very curious to know what he's going to do, for he's anxious to start working at once. Enclosed, you will find a letter from our mother, which she requested me to forward to you. Tassay will send you the paints and the canvas shortly. I hope to see you soon, and a cordial handshake to Gauguin. Theo. I'm trying to find where I have the title for this video, because that was where I wanted to reach in terms of this Van Gogh letters. He says, Gauguin is astonishing as a man. He does not let himself get out of hand, and he will wait here very quietly, working hard for the right moment to take a great step forward. He needs rest as much as I do. Well, that's not going to be true. Doesn't he mention something about blood? Yeah, so it's the letter after this, I think. So, yeah, on the 28th of October, I'm just going to go through this very quickly, and we'll come and deal with it properly in the next Van Gogh letters 67. Where does he say? It talks about Gauguin has made many sea voyages. I did not know that he was a regular mariner. He talks about um, it says, my brain is feeling tired and dried up, but this week I'm feeling better. Um, talks about Gauguin describing the tropical countries. Is it really not in this letter either? My dear comrade Bernard, there it is. So he doesn't say this to his brother. He says it to Bernard. He says, with Gauguin, blood and sex prevail over ambition. He also says, well, here we are with the slightest doubt in the presence of a virgin creature with savage instincts. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Deborah. I just wanted to show you where that comes from. It actually comes from a letter dated 2nd November, and it's in the context of this letter that something really amazing happens. Van Gogh and Gauguin go to this Les Allées Champs. It's the Roman mausoleum. I was there myself, and they go there together, and they both paint the same thing. And you can see Van Gogh paints it in a similar style. Can you see that this sort of feels like Gauguin, right? And so Van Gogh is kind of experimenting with Gauguin's style, if, for the lack of a better word. In any event, I was hoping we would get as far as this, but we didn't. So we'll be continuing. I've kind of narrated 2 videos already today. My voice, I don't have any water left, so I'm not going to take it further than that. We have just hit the 2-hour mark, so I think we're going to stop here at this letter, the 28th of October. So what we can look forward to in the next letter is Van Gogh responding to Theo's incredibly gracious letter. And so we're going to see what he says in response to that. You can also see when he talks to Bernard about sex and blood that very quickly Gauguin has started indulging in his favorite activities and probably is dragging Vincent along with him, right? Very quickly, he arrives on the 24th of October and he's talking about sex and blood trumping ambition by the 2nd of November. It's pretty quick. I want to end off by showing you something. The one thing I want to show you is this article. The other was another article. I don't know if I can find it now. Is it? See if I can. Here it is. Okay. So, wow, Chelsea, thank you so much. I was looking on a different screen. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. So, what I want to share with you, I'm just going to be on for another 5 minutes or so, is this article is very current. It came out July 11th, 2023, and it is once again an expert or someone who thinks he knows what he's talking about just giving a little summary of the end of Vincent's life. And so this is what he writes. And I'm sharing this with you now because you have a similar situation. Van Gogh meets Gauguin, and in 2 months after that, he loses his ear, right? In the summer of 1890, he meets Dr. Gachet. Well, 2 months later, he's dead. It's a very similar time frame. And so I do want to juxtapose those. I do want to compare those. So in this article, I'll put a link to that in chat. He says, Stephanie says, thank you very much for your generosity. Yeah, but Deborah, he was already farting before and a lot. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Okay, so he says, a doctor can be a consoling presence in the life of any troubled human being. Such was Dr. Paul Gachet, the physician, phrenologist, artist, and art collector. Well, what he's leaving out there was that Dr. Paul Gachet he was a military doctor, and also he performed autopsies. He was part of the board of autopsy practitioners in France. Yes, he was a man of many parts, who became an intimate, or as Van Gogh himself once described him, a ready-made friend and something like a new brother. What he doesn't mention here is that Van Gogh actually said we shouldn't trust him. And he also said he's madder than what I am. So you see, it's being very selective about what you're saying. Then he says they met in the village of Orvez, where Van Gogh lodged in an attic, and there you have it. Um, for 70 days in 1890 before taking his own life in July 29. In part, Van Gogh was in flight from himself and the terrible experiences of asylum life at Saint-Remy, where he had spent the previous year. He sought a place of calm and rural solace. So, what he's saying here is that Van Gogh was in flight from himself and the terrible experiences of asylum life, and then he kind of lost that battle and took his own life. That is the short bullshit version of Van Gogh's story. Does it does it sound true to you? Does that make sense? Van Gogh was in flight from himself. In his letters, in any of the letters we've dealt with, does he say, I can't live with myself anymore. I can't do this anymore. I can't take this anymore. You know what? I think I need to give up art. Does he say that? And obviously, he did have some terrible experiences in the asylum life, but he doesn't mention them. He doesn't mention them in Orvez, right? Okay. In any event, if you want to read the rest of the article, you can. I wanted to juxtapose this, what I feel is a bullshit story for the end of his period in Orvez with the bullshit story for the end of Van Gogh's period in all, right? Okay, and now I'm going to end off with something completely different. Um, I just stumbled on this and I thought I'd love to share this with you guys. And so, yeah, we are. So, this is an article from the Telegraph, UK news website of the year. Um, Revealed the greatest country on earth according to you, according to the people who voted, right? These came from the 2023 Telegraph Travel Awards. So basically, British travel people voted, and this is who they named were the world's best nations. And obviously, it's in terms of travel, it's in terms of places to travel to, right? And what do you think is the greatest country on earth according to these travel awards? So I'm not going to go through any of this. I'm just going to go very quickly through um, the pictures. Sorry, let's do it like that. So here we go. It says here, which I must say I can't really understand. It says, more mysterious is the coolness towards the United States, which was the winner in 2011. Its position in the present 36th puts it below the likes of Iceland, Ecuador, and Cuba. They're saying it's mysterious that people are feeling that way. And so they say still awards about celebration. And so the first country mentioned here is Botswana, number 10. Thanks a lot, Mickey. That's such a great compliment. Thank you. So in terms of these, and obviously it's subjective. It's this group of people, and this is their selection, right? Um, Botswana is directly north of South Africa. It's a country directly north of South Africa. It's about half the size of South Africa, with only 2 million people. It's one of the world's emptiest countries. It's also got one of the world's most incredible wildernesses, in the same way that the Alaska and the Amazon are two huge pristine wildernesses. The Okavango swamp in Botswana is also a very large pristine wilderness teeming with wild animals, and that's where this picture's taken. I think Botswana's got the world's largest elephant herds. And I've been there a couple of times. It is an incredible country. I'm not going to take you through any of this. The next country is Costa Rica, where, what is her name? Caitlin Armstrong, didn't she seek refuge over there? If you guys want to read this, yeah, that is definitely true. I certainly experienced that. Silent Murmur says probably their own country. Well, we'll see. Costa Rica, number 9. What country is that? India, number 8. What country do you think that is? Any guesses? What country are we talking about here? Wish I had some more water. Any guesses what country this is referring to? Kenya is at number 7. Good guess, Stephanie. I think Stephanie's actually been to Kenya, if I remember correctly. Then Italy is at number 6. That country is very high on the list of countries I'm intending to travel to quite soon. Italy, number 6. And then quite a long thing about that. Okay, let's get through. Where do you think that is? Where do you think that is? Any ideas? I'd also love to visit Spain. That is Australia. In fact, Australia's west coast. I've actually been there. And so Australia is ranked number 5. Okay, number 4. Well, I think that gives it away, right? Japan. Japan's at number 4. I'm frankly a little bit surprised that Japan's that high. Any ideas where that might be? Maldives. That's another place I'd love to go. By the way, I feel quite embarrassed to say this. I took advantage of an Instagram ad that was offering cheap last-minute hotel deals in the Maldives, and I paid for everything, and it was ultimately a scam targeted at South Africans. And so I ended up paying something like 6,000 Rand, which is around about $300. I paid $300 to this thing, and it was a scam, and a lot of people lost money. But that was because I wanted to go to the Maldives. So yeah. And so, what's number 2? Let's have a look. What country do you think that is? What country do you think that is? Any thoughts? Any ideas? New Zealand. New Zealand is at number 2. Another country I wouldn't mind going to. I'm not crazy about New Zealand's weather, but it certainly is a beautiful country made famous by The Lord of the Rings. Did you guys know that James Cameron lives in New Zealand? Did you guys know that? Okay, and so which country do you think is the number 1? What country is, according to this, what do they say here? What country do you think is the greatest country on earth according to you? What do you think is the greatest country on earth? Well, I was pretty surprised to see this. New Zealand is number 2. Guess which country is number 1? South Africa. How's that? And there is a picture of South Africa. That's actually the Cape. That's the Cape area, just around the corner from Cape Town. I have an aunt that lives in this part of this particular bay. But yeah, so there you have it. Cape Town voted the greatest country on earth for travel. And I think the reason is really quite simple. It's really cheap, and it's accessible in terms of it's not a very big country. You can go through the whole country in a couple of weeks, and there's a lot to see. There's a very varied landscape over a short distance. But there you have it. I'll just quickly read what they say here. Your reward for 12 hours in the air is a place of true beauty. Cape Town, a supermodel at the foot of Table Mountain. The garden route, a ribbon of road trip nirvana. That's also true. The wineries of Franschhoek and Stellenbosch, crafting fine vintages. The landscape thrilling to the peaks and troughs of the Drakensberg Range and the Molotsi Canyon. Kruger National Park, a roaring wildlife zone. This coronation has been coming. South Africa was third on this poll in 2017, second in 2018. A love match consummated. So if any of you want to see whether this is true, I'll be very happy to show you around. But it's not just bluster if I say, come to South Africa, come to, let's go and have a look at Plettenberg Bay or Cape Town or whatever. I'll be happy to show you guys around. I'm talking about the Van Gogh Letters community because I sort of feel like I know all of you. So if you think this is kind of manufactured, this is an article that came out just the other day. It's not like something out of the archives. This came out 11 July 2023. I'm quite surprised that they don't mention the low cost, but I personally believe that's a big reason why it's so popular. So anyway, I thought I would share that with you guys. That's all from my side. I quite like the fact that there's like this corona around my head. It wasn't really planned. But thanks a lot, guys, for the super chats. I'm really pleased to have over 30 of you guys in a live that was really very last minute, especially after all those postponements. Can you tell that the narrative of these letters is getting more charged, it's getting more exciting, it's getting more kind of scary, it's getting more it's getting to be very consequential. And so from now on, I think the next at least 4 or 5 Van Gogh letters, you really aren't going to want to miss them, because each set of 2, 3, 4, 5 letters, we are gauging in a lot of detail from out of the horse's mouth from Van Gogh himself what is going on between now and when he loses his ear. Very dramatic, terrible, traumatic moment. How did it happen? And in terms of that, I think one can say who is to blame. Is Van Gogh to blame or is Gauguin to blame? We can say Van Gogh is to blame for getting excited and getting emotional and whatever, but him losing his ear is either his own fault or it's Gauguin. Either Gauguin cuts it off or he does. And so we're going to find out which one it is. Snow Lion says, I would never thought I'd enjoy these letters so much. I'm so glad that Nick has introduced us to these magical words. Really good to hear. Thank you. Okay, cool. Okay, so until Wednesday, I'm pretty sure that I will be here on Wednesday. I was just working very, very hard this week and I had to deal with some tummy issues, but I probably will be back on Wednesday. You guys must kind of decide amongst yourselves. Do you guys want to go to South Africa? You can bring your significant others with. Maybe, yeah, think about it. But maybe when I'm in America again, I can convince one or two of you in person. That'll be worth it. Wow, Chelsea says, I'm reading The Murder of Vincent van Gogh and following along halfway through. How is it so far? How is it so far? Is it compelling reading? Have you learned anything? Give to me a hug for me. Okay, I'll do so. Zircon says, I can't travel anymore. Oh, bees. Okay. You don't have to go to Botswana. Anyway, you can always come in a hazmat suit. Did you guys see the last picture I posted onto Instagram? It's of these beautiful, I think they're called Asian irises or something, Asian lilies, beautiful orange flowers. All of them are sort of flowered. It really looks quite beautiful. If you haven't seen them, go and check it out. Okay, that's it from me. The book is so intense. Okay. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for being here. Chelsea says, it's amazing. I can't believe the amount I'm learning from your perspective. Great. That's really nice to hear. I can't wait till that book has 40 reviews. It just seems stuck on 39. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, guys, everyone who was here, really good to see you. Um, the the mods, even though you didn't have to do very much, but Stephanie and Sharon, it's always good having you guys here. Guys, you must have a great week. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.